Okay, so we're going to go over some air ride stuff for your test sheets. I believe it's 250 through 252 and maybe another one. Anyway, the air ride is gotten really popular because it's adjustable by load. So if you have like a leaf spring suspension or some other type of suspension on the truck other than air ride, when the truck is not loaded, so let's just say you don't have a trailer at all, like on this truck, and drove it, the ride is extremely rough. It may set a little bit high in the back. It creates a little bit of brake balance problems, real touchy brakes when you don't have a load on the trailer and whatnot, because of the leaf spring suspension having to be strong enough to support the weight of a loaded truck. The back of the truck raises up when you don't have a load on it. So air ride allows for a constant ride height and allows it to soften basically the suspension up a little bit when the truck's not loaded, but add more air to the bags to maintain a specific height as you load weight to the truck. So that's one of the big advantages, and a lot of the trucks now are air ride. The negative of it is you got a whole lot of potential air leaks, higher maintenance because the bags are going to wear out, lines are going to crack and leak. So it's a little bit higher maintenance. It's not a real bad thing, but that's kind of the negative of it. Most of what you'll be doing with air suspension is either adjusting it or replacing the airbags. So before you work on any air suspension, though, you're going to have to identify which one's on the truck. I know this red Freightliner has like either 4 or 5 different listings. When you look up air suspension in the Truck Pro Demand, so you have to do a visual inspection to figure out what's on the truck to begin with. So we can come out and look at this one and see that it's got the Freightliner symbol and it says Airliner on it. That will let you determine which one you need to select when you get into Truck Pro Demand. As far as the airbags themselves, they're just they're called an air, it's a spring assembly, but the rubber part in the middle is called a bellows. So it has a seal at the top and at the bottom, much like a bead on a tire. Just be sure you always change out the whole spring assembly, because you can get just an air bellows occasionally, but it is a nightmare to try to put it onto these plates on the end here and get it to seal up. I wouldn't even try it. Just be sure the parts man is getting you an air spring assembly, which is the plates and the bellows already assembled. They'll probably have 2 bolts on top, or 2 studs, generally 1 in the bottom. Pretty simple to change. Just be sure you got the suspension blocked up like you should. Know that, you know, an airbag vehicle will sink pretty low, so there is the potential for the vehicle to lower down on you. Even if you got the axle blocked up, the frame can lower when all the air leaves the bag. So be a little extra cautious when you're getting under a airbag or air ride suspension equipped vehicle. So just like you would find a tire that's leaking, most of the time on a bag you'll hear it, but you can take soapy water in a spray bottle and spray all over it like you would a tire, and it will bubble. Usually it's going to be up here in this top area where it gets flexed a whole lot, or the bottom area. Not a whole lot here in the side. I mean, it can, but normally it'll be where it gets flexed a whole lot, kind of like a sidewall on a tire. You have to identify which air suspension you have to be able to check the ride heights. Every one of them is going to tell you a different place to check and give you a different spec. So that's why you have to identify first which kind that it has. A little extra caveat for the air ride. Since air ride stuff sets on bags and doesn't have a solid piece of metal like a leaf spring, you have a lateral rod here. The automotive would call it a panhard rod, but anyway, you have a rod here going across that keeps the axle centered in the truck and keeps it from moving side to side, since it's basically sitting on airbags. This adds its stability to keep the back of the truck from moving around on the bags themselves. This Freightliner, like most vehicles, it's a little bit hard to see, but our linkage is right here. It connects to the axle on this truck, on the front axle here. Comes up here and hooks onto the lever coming off of the ride height control valve. So basically, as weight's added to the truck frame is going to come down, but since that linkage is hooked to the rear axle and is not going to drop, it's going to push that lever up and add more air the bags up more, so it's going to raise it up. If weight goes away from the vehicle, you unload it or whatever, that's going to drop down below the center line and let air out until it centers back up. So that's what you're adjusting when you adjust the ride height. Okay. Remember, when you adjust ride height, you need to move the vehicle. If you just set the ride height and say it's good and let it go, it will move a little bit once it encounters some bumps. So a lot of times there's like a little bump coming in and out of the shop door. You can back the truck up and pull it back into the bay or something like that and recheck it, because it will move a little. So if you just set it and send it out the door, it may come back to you with it not being set right. So be sure you move the vehicle and recheck your ride height once you do an adjustment on it. Once again, anytime you're messing with that adjustment or under the vehicle, you might probably need to throw a jack stand or something under the frame so that if something happens, the frame can't drop down on you. You're going to see in your task sheet it talking about a dump valve. So another benefit to air ride that drivers like is, if you've ever hooked a trailer to the truck, there's a hand crank on the trailer and you have to basically jack the trailer up or lower it to get it the right height to engage the old fifth wheel here. Drivers don't like to get out of the truck and do that manual labor, most drivers. So to make it easier and faster to hook up to the trailer, there is a flip switch that looks just like the switch that locks and unlocks your inner axle lock for the differential, the fifth wheel slide. It's just a little flip lever that's on the dash, but it's a dump valve. So if you flip that valve, it lets all the air out of these bags in the back of the truck, will sink down. You can drive or back under the trailer, engage the kingpin, and then flip a switch, air it back up, and it takes all the weight off the trailer, and then it's easy for the driver to dolly it up enough where the landing gear doesn't hit the ground as you hit bumps and encounter terrain and whatnot. So anyway, it makes it easier on the driver. So the dump valve just dumps all the air out, lowers it. When you flip it, it airs back up, and you're back in business. So that's what the dump valve part of it is. As far as any kind of regulator, bags are generally regulated to about 100 PSI. It's hard to find that in the service manual. You can look for it, but you may or may not find it depending on what truck it is. But it's just got a regulator valve, because our air tanks hold generally 120 pounds of air pressure, 125 right in there. They don't want that much going to the bag, so they put a regulator valve on it and regulate it down to 100. One of your task sheets is about inspecting shock absorbers. I'm going to throw that in on the end of this one and not have to do another one, but it's really simple. Shock absorbers are mounted all the way around. They've got some type of a rubber bushing in the upper part and the bottom part of the shock absorber. So you inspect those bushings and make sure they're in good shape and not deteriorated and cracked or chunks of rubber missing. Make sure the fasteners or the bolts are tight on them. And a defective shock, since it's a hydraulic cylinder basically, when they go bad, they will leak oil. So anytime you see a shock that has oil on the shock itself, this bottom part, if there's oil on that, you have a bad shock absorber, because the seal's leaking and it's letting the hydraulic fluid out of the shock. Therefore the shock's not any good. So the main thing you're going to inspect there is no oil on that. The bushings, the mounting, shock absorbers are pretty easy to inspect.